All right, guys, I am recording this time, so that is good news. Let's see if everyone can kind of hold on. Let me see if I can make this chat any bigger. Yeah, if we can use, let's see, should we use the how about we do this? Can everyone join the bot testing channel, and then rather than chatting in GoToMeeting, can we just do all of our chatting in the bot testing channel? That way, if you don't have a mic, you can just talk to me in that channel, and I'll keep an eye on it the whole time to answer questions. Yes, I will put a link in the mentor chat right now. Yeah, you can just click that link and it'll take you to the channel. And then go ahead and join the channel. And then make sure you guys are writing to me or asking questions whenever something doesn't make sense or I don't clarify well enough. Last time everyone was pretty quiet, but I'd like everyone to kind of keep the chat going, ask questions, make jokes, let me know that you're out there. Can everyone see my screen? I should have a command window and Sublime in the background. We'll just do a chat, or we'll just do a test. Everyone follow Zach's lead and give a thumbs up in the bot testing channel. Boom, boom. All right, yeah. Cool. Let's see. Christian, Dan S., are you guys ready to go? And Steve. All right, let me just confirm Steve's in. Christian. Alice just joined up. All right, Alice, if you can hear me, we're going to switch over to the bot testing channel. So make sure you're in that channel. Sorry for spamming everyone with this everyone, but let's see. All right, I'm ready. We're ready to rock. Cool. All right, so guys, so we're going to cover the SlackBot, setting one up from scratch. We're going to be following a tutorial that I found online prior to, I guess, Friday evening. I've never even looked at building a SlackBot or what's involved in it. So I kind of want to show you that process of what I do. I mean, this one was super simple, but what I do when I want to start something new that I have no idea anything about, right? And that almost always starts with a Google search. So that's all I did, and came to, so I just, Python, SlackBot. Always put Python. Your browser, your Google gets smarter as you search for more programming things, and it always kind of offers that. But Python, SlackBot, pretty easy. Sometimes it's a little more complicated. I was trying to set up like a Bing API, like Bing Maps API and Google Maps API. That took a little bit longer to like dig into like the proper documentation, just because they have so much documentation, so many different products. It's a lot harder to find. But Python SlackBot pretty much got lucky on this first link here. So this is the tutorial I used. I encourage all of you to follow it, because I'm going to be just kind of skipping through and taking the parts and pieces that we need. But so I'm not going to read it because I don't want to read to you guys. But I encourage you to read through this after we're done. You try it yourself. So so basically, yeah, how to build your first SlackBot with Python. We're going to set it up. Tools we need Python 2 or 3. So it's compatible with either. We're going to use Python 3 almost always. I'll always encourage you to use one of the latest versions of Python unless you have some really compelling reason to be using Python 2. Python 2 is no longer, there was a big kind of split in the whole Python community between Python 2 and Python 3. A lot of that was because a lot of older, and even like the more experienced developers, all of their projects were using Python 2, and there wasn't an easy way to convert to Python 3. So older projects a lot of times will be using like Python 2.3, 2.4, 2.6, 2.7. That's just because they can't update them without breaking 26 other compatibility issues. But whenever you're starting a new project, there's literally zero reason to use Python 2.7. And to add on to that, like Django 2.0, I think it's an alpha right now, or maybe beta. They don't support Python 2 at all. So if you want to use Python 2 your whole life, I'm sorry. There's also there's a lot of little things in Python 2 that that Python 3 handles for you, and I think it's a lot harder, especially for beginners, to understand all those differences. Python 3 is a little bit more implicit, like it kind of makes decisions for you. And so, and an example of that would be like when you're dividing, and I'll just show you real quick what I mean. Whoops. Python. When you're dividing in so 3 divided by 3 should equal 1. If you're dividing in Python 2 and you go like 3 divided by 2, you're not going to get 1.5 like you would think. You're actually going to get 1, because it's going to take, it doesn't do decimals unless you explicitly say 3 divided by 2.0. Then it'll give you the right answer. But if Python 2, you try 3 divided by 2, it's actually going to give you 1. And so that's confusing, especially for new people. So I recommend Python 3 all the way. If anyone has any problems with that, let me know, and we'll talk it out politely. Niners have officially lost, so we'll get going here. So first things first, when you start a new project, the way I like to have this set up is, and I know this is a little bit different depending on whether you're on Windows or Mac or whatever, but I have one folder here set up, projects, in my C drive, that has all my different projects that I work on. And that way everything starts with a new project folder. So we're going to call this, I already have a SlackBot. I have a Slack dashbot. So we're just going to call this SlackBot. So create a new folder, and then if you're in your shell on Windows, you can do that with make their SlackBot. But we just made it. First of all, let me get out of that. We're going to cd into my folder. And this is the one I just made. So when we look in there, we see I've got nothing in this folder. We'll just verify that. I got nothing in this folder, right? So the first thing I do when I start a new project, create a new Virtualenv. And I know some of you don't have this set up yet. And if you do not have it set up yet, hit me up because I'm working through getting everyone set up on this stuff. But this is pretty much a requirement, especially when you get working on more than one project. There's just no way to properly keep all your requirements if everything's installed globally. And I'll show you what I mean by that right now. So this command, Virtualenv, it creates a environment for you, a virtual environment, and I'm just naming it env, end, and that's pretty standard. Many developers use that convention, Python developers. You can name your environment anything you want. For example, I could do Virtualenv. Like sometimes people will call it the name of the project, so maybe I call it like bot or SlackBot, SBot, something. I could do that, but since we're going to create it in our project folder, I think that's a little redundant, and then it's just a lot easier to keep track of. And then to activate that on Windows, we go N scripts activate, and that's pretty much the same as going cd, m cd scripts, and then just typing activate. But it's quicker if you just do the convention I gave you. So first of all, just to show you what I mean with requirements, and this has to do with all the different Python packages that you install. So you got like Django. In this example, we're going to use a Python package called Slack Client. And all these packages can be found on this website, PyPy. This website here. You can find pretty much any package. And if you create your own package, you can log in, register, and upload your own package to PyPy. And once it's on PyPy, that means it's available in pip. So pip is another thing that some of you may or may not have set up, but it's going to be one of the first things we make sure, like just getting your environment set up for the first time. And what pip allows you to do is just install any package on this website. Excuse me. And any version of it, because a lot of times, like for example, Django, you might need to install Django 1.8, Django 1.10, whatever matches the project that you're working on. Let's see. So first of all, I'm going to deactivate my new environment that I made just because I want to show you. When your environment's activated, you'll see a little parentheses with your environment name there. That's how you know. So when I deactivate it, that goes away. Activate it again, and it comes back, right? So we're going to deactivate it, and then pip has a command called pip freeze. And this shows you everything that is, every Python package that you've installed in your current environment. So we're not in any environment, any Virtualenv that I've created right now. So this is just going to look at everything I actually have installed on globally on my machine. So I've got a ton of things on here. And when you're just messing around, or just like you're on your standard Python, if I go into Python like this, I'm going to have access to all these different libraries. But that can cause issues in some cases. For example, if a website you're working on uses Django 1.8 and then you start a new project with Django 1.11, you can't work on your 1.8 website while you have Django 1.11 installed. So pip freeze gives you a list of all your Python packages. We're going to go into my environment again. So we're just going to go and activate. So now that I've got it activated, pip freeze. Boom, I got nothing now. So now I can go and pip install this or that. And once I install those, pip freeze, I'll be able to see them. And sometimes, depending on your setup, you might have in a new clean environment, you might have one or two packages. That has to do with your operating system and what kind of packages it needs just on like a default layer. So don't worry too much about that. So that's pip. Let's see. Okay, so next up, so we got, like I said, pip and Virtualenv, free Slack account. We already have that set up, so we're going to get into that next. Then we need to install this official Python Slack client code library. So Slack client, what that is Slack has an API that we can use. So we can use the request library and access that if we wanted to, but the Slack client is going to make it a lot simpler to interact with their library. Most APIs, before too long, someone will develop some kind of wrapper for it. Like I use Trello a lot. Trello's got PyTrello, which is just a wrapper for their API. I didn't use it at first, but I'm starting to use it more now. The Slack client is actually built by Slack, so it's like an officially supported client. But it's really good, so we're going to use it, and then we're going to need a Slack API testing token. We're going to grab that in a second here. So first of all, we're just going to pip install Slack client. Oops, sorry. Ooh. Does Virtualenv have all the standard Python modules? Yeah. Virtualenv has access to everything that your Python version has. So that's a good point real quick. Let's see. So I just did pip install Slack client right here. And I realized I had that on the wrong screen. You guys probably couldn't see it. But that installed. So now when I just run pip freeze real quick, you will see all of the libraries that, so we got Slack client here, and Slack client actually has dependencies of its own. So like it needs the request library that I was talking about. Request library actually is built upon URL lib. So you might see some other ones in here. Like I said, don't worry about it. That's fine. It's just showing you all the requirements for all of your packages that you have installed. So to answer your question about standard modules, yeah, anything in the standard library you're going to have, whatever version of Python you have. So let's see. You can always check your Python version. And this is looking specifically in my virtual environment. But just Python version, and then you can do the same pip -- version. And this is kind of like, it's a trick for seeing if it's actually installed properly or not. Virtualenv version pip freeze automatically create. No, but I'm going to show you exactly how to do that just now. So one other thing before I get to that, though, I just want to show you. I'm going to deactivate this. And if you have, so there is a use case sometimes if you want to test something in Python 2 and Python 3, or you want to test it in Python 3.5 and Python 3.6, you can create multiple Python environment, or I'm sorry, multiple virtual environments. I mean, you can create as many as you want, but you can run, like, I think it's, I never do it personally very often. So, and then you pass in this P, and then you tell it which. So if you had a path to a different Python that you wanted to use, see Python 2.7, right, and then Python, I could pass in a different version of Python if I wanted to. And then it would create a virtualenv where Python points to that specific version of Python. I can cover that later with you guys. I know, especially you guys on Mac. I think Python 2.7 is installed by default on Mac. So a lot of times your standard, if you just type Python, that's pointing at Python 2.7. So you actually have to type Python 3 to point to your installed Python 3 version. But like I said, I'll get into that later with you guys if you have personal questions on that. So we're going to just activate this one more time. Whoops. And env here, again, if you had a different name for your environment, you would type that. And then scripts, and then activate. And so all that's doing is, this is my folder. This is, when I create the virtualenv, it creates this folder, env, whatever you named it. Inside of that, you have scripts. Inside of that, activate. So all you're doing is just opening that file and opening that script, and that runs everything that activates your environment for you. Now, pip freeze does not create your requirements file. Whoops. See, I'll run that right now. And we'll go look at the folder I just closed. So yeah, that didn't do anything. It shows us here, it outputs it, but if we want to output that to a file, it's pretty easy. We do pip freeze, this close bracket, and then the name of the file. And so I can do pip freeze so these both contain the same thing. So here's requirements.txt, here's hi.txt. They output the pip freeze to a text file. So that's nice. And we're going to delete hi.txt because we don't need it. So requirements.txt, for those of you who don't know, hold on. The commands are also true on terminal, I'm assuming. Yeah, with Mac, the commands are slightly different, and you can look them up pretty easily by just like typing like Mac terminal, whatever command you're looking for, or whatever you're trying to do. There's usually a Slack Overflow question on it. I've been helping a few people getting Mac set up, so I can help you guys get set up on Mac, but I'm not super experienced with it. I've never owned a Mac. I have an iPhone, but I've always been a Windows user. But I or someone else can get you help with that if you need it. So anyways, with our requirements.txt, what that allows, the reason you always push that to a project is because, say I wanted to work on this on a new machine. Say I wanted to work on this on my work laptop. I could pull this down from GitHub with the requirements file right here. All I have to do to install, so say I had 47 different dependencies in this project. Rather than going pip install request, pip install Slack client, pip install Django, pip install all these things, I can just run pip install r requirements.txt, and that's going to go ahead and install everything that's in that requirements file. So I'm just passing in the name of the file it's looking for. This R says to look for a file instead of just trying to install a package that it's going to go find. But that's very useful. We'll get into that more, but for now I just want to show you like the basic setup steps. So that requirements.txt is one of the, creating this is one of ours. And then you need to have Git installed for this, and if you don't, that's another thing we'll get set up for you. But Git init, that's going to say, in this folder, I am a Git repository, so I'm going to create a Git repo for this project. And one thing I want to explain is Git and GitHub are two completely separate things. GitHub is a website that hosts Git repositories. Another example of that is like Bitbucket, and I know there's a couple others. I think Git something. Also like Heroku, what I use to host most of my apps, they have their own repository. So so Git and GitHub aren't the same thing. They all use Git. Git is like the syntax that we're writing to do the commands, and it's all the same across all these different websites because they all use Git. But GitHub is something else. So I actually, what I did there, you'll see this, and it's a hidden folder. So when you type, after you get Git installed and you type Git in it, and you don't see a folder, it's probably because it's hidden. So you want to go and just make sure that you got to do it from your control panel on Windows, just show hidden folders. So this keeps track of everything in your GitHub. So it keeps track of all your different branches, keeps track, sorry, not GitHub, Git, your current Git repo. This keeps track of your local Git repo. Your GitHub repo is going to have different things, or it can be different than your local one. So you might have branches on GitHub that you don't have locally. And like for me, I work on my work machine, then I work on my personal laptop, and I have to make sure all of those are up to date all the time. And so you'll run something like git fetch from GitHub or whatever you called. But so I just wanted to explain that those are different things. So you have a local Git repository, and then you have whatever you decide to use. Here we're going to be using GitHub primarily. Again, unless someone has a compelling reason to use something else. But I like GitHub. Been using it for a while. Most people like GitHub. So it's separate. We haven't pushed anything to GitHub yet. I haven't even created a repo for this yet, but I have it locally. So I can start doing commits and adding comments, creating branches. I can do that all locally. I'm just not going to be able to share it with anyone. That's the point of GitHub. This is a one place where we can share it across other people. Let's see. So now that we've created our Git repo locally, we're going to go ahead and create a repository on GitHub. So we'll do that. Let's go to github.com and create a new repo. We're just going to call this SlackBot. We're going to call it test because I already have one. I'm going to delete this with, excuse me, when we're done with it. Then you can give it a description, SlackBot, live stream, creation, whatever. I don't know. And then public or private. Everything's public unless you pay extra for a private. Private you can use, obviously, if you're doing like freelance work and it's proprietary. Since we have created files locally, we don't want GitHub to create anything for us. I'll do another live stream where I show how to pull an existing Git project and pull it locally to your machine. But for this one, we're creating the repo locally and then we're pushing it to GitHub. So I don't want to initialize this with the README because we're going to create that on our machine. So this is going to create a blank repo. And then the nice thing is this actually gives us the steps for pushing or pulling or getting it from somewhere else. So, so to push an existing repository, we're going to use all this. These are actually pretty much similar. This just assumes that you already have your whole project set up. Oops. So again, any questions, let me know. Let's see. So we're kind of going to start following some of these steps. So we've done Git init. And then we want to create a README file. So you can do this echo command, and that'll create one for you with SlackBot test in it. But we're actually going to create one. Let's see. So first things first. So this is Sublime Text. This is my text editor. It's the same if you have, you know, Notepad++ or using PyCharm. PyCharm's a little bit different. PyCharm's a full IDE, has a lot of extra features. I recommend if you're a beginner, use something like Notepad++ or Sublime Text. And I use that all the time, but until you understand what all the magic that PyCharm does for you, I recommend you understand how to do it by yourself with just a text editor. So, so this is like a fully featured text editor. It's got a ton of sweet features that we can use for development. But I'm just going to go find our folder and just bring in any of the files and folders that we have. Let's see, that is SlackBot. So we see our requirements.txt file here, and the end, Git is hidden, and I think by default Sublime Text just doesn't show it because it's not relevant to us. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to create a new file, readme.md, and .md creates a markdown file, and markdown is just like a real quick and dirty, it's like writing HTML, but you're using a different syntax that's a lot simpler. So this, and I'll just show you one of my other one of my other projects. So it allows you to add like this formatting, this stuff here, real simply, like real easily. You just, I'm gonna go ahead. There's a link here I'm gonna share with y'all. It's just a markdown cheat sheet. So this shows you how to write in markdown. So if I want an H1 header, all I do is just use this pound symbol, and it creates that, lists, links, how to write code, syntax, all that stuff's here. So I'm going to share that with y'all. We're going to go back to our repo. And we're just going to create a quick README file. So we're going to call this ClubPython SlackBot. And then a header 2, which is like a smaller version of header, is 2 pounds or 3 pounds. So you know, we might put like contents here and then make a list, SlackBot, how to set up, whatever. We're going to fill that in later. But it's nice to have something up and running. I'll show you what that looks like. So we save that, and so now I'll show you in our folder. We've got our new README. So if I try and open this, it's not going to look like anything. Windows isn't even going to know how to open it. But GitHub will output that. GitHub will actually just show that in our project. I'll actually show you in a minute. So the next thing we want to create for our file is a .gitignore file. So what this does, new file. This is telling Git what to ignore, what we don't want to push across repositories. So let's say that you and I are both working on a project. I've created a local virtual environment. It's all stored in this env file. I don't want to share that with you. You're going to go create your own virtual environment. So there's no reason for me to share that with you. I guess in some cases there could be, but I don't typically share it. Another one's this our local Git repo. We don't want that going up to GitHub. That's going to cause all sorts of problems. If you override their GitHub or their Git repo with your Git repo. So what we do is we just add .git. If it's a file, you end it with a slash to let it know it's a. So I'm not going to save this yet. And first of all, I'm going to show you. So now that's a Git repo, we can send it Git commands and see what we're working on here. So if I were to commit this right now, it would add gitignore, the readme.md. It would automatically add our env folder, which holds our environment. And then I guess it's got something in there that ignores .git, but I'm going to add it anyways, just to be safe. And then requirements.txt. But now I'm going to save this because we want to ignore this env file. And now when I say git status, that disappeared. So now I'm not going to push that up to GitHub or my local Git repository. It's not going to track that. These are untracked files. So real quick, now that we've got that basis up and running, we're just going to do our first commit to GitHub. And so the first thing before we do that, we need to get our GitHub link here, which is right here. You can always get it when you're in any repo. It's got a link over here. It'll say like download or clone. And then we need to add a remote because right now, if we do anything in Git, it's only storing it locally. But we want to add a remote, what's called a remote, which is just where our new repo is going to be stored, which is this link right here. So git remote add, git remote add origin. Origin is like a standard naming convention. You can name it something else, especially maybe you have, like in my case, I've got a Git repo locally, I've got a Git repo on GitHub, and I've got a Git repo in Heroku where I push live. So I've got several different ones. So in that case, I'll call this GitHub so I know where I'm pushing to. I recommend calling it origin probably, and I probably should here too, but I'm not gonna just because I'm so used to typing GitHub. And then we just post our link. You'll notice even me sometimes, like, I mean, if there's not a command I remember, I just go, how do I git push override local, or git pull override local. There's a whole bunch of commands, and I'm not talking about just Git. I'm talking about Python, anything. I Google shit all the time, and you will too. So if you're Googling all the time, doesn't make you any less of a developer. It just means you're more efficient because you don't have to store all that stuff in your brain. So I use like little cheat sheets and stuff all the time. So we added the remote, and we can test that by just saying git remote I think it's B. Yep. And so it says GitHub over here. And this is our link for fetching and pushing. And just to show you that I can add more remotes, git add, we'll call this something else, test, and then HTTPS. We're going to make this a fake one to see if it works. Yep, it did. So then if we go git remote B, we'll see one for test here, one for GitHub. And we're not going to use that test one, obviously, but I just wanted to show you that you can use it. So now that we've set up our remote, now we can actually connect to this. So now when I push to GitHub, it's going to push to my repository right here. So there's a couple commands you want to run that you want to get comfortable with, and that is git status, because that's going to show you everything that's untracked right now that is new that you would like to track. So we run git status. I pretty much do that every time before I'm getting ready to push something, just to make sure, because sometimes I forgot, I edited a file I don't want to push, or something's not coming in that I thought it was. So I just double check it's all correct. When I'm ready, you do git add. Now I can add these all individually, readme.md, and so git status, and I see, okay, so now it's tracking. So now if I committed right now, it would go ahead and commit the change to readme, but it wouldn't commit the change to .gitignore or requirements.txt. Now a shortcut, if you just want to do everything, is git add period. So if I check again, and then I don't remove as much, so I think it's RM, but just to show you, I can pull them back out. Nope, there's a different way. I'm not going to get into it right now. If you mess up, let me know and I'll tell you, but I can't remember off the top of my head. So git status, we got all those. So just because you've added them doesn't mean they're committed yet. So for that, you need to do git commit. Then every commit needs a message, and you do that with this -m, and then you add a comment about your commit. So typically what you've changed, standard for your first commit is just first commit. But we're going to push again at the end when we're done with this. So I'll give you another example of what that looks like, but git commit. And then finally, to push, so that's committed it locally, but we want to commit this to GitHub. So again, if you name this origin, it would be origin right here. And then we only have one branch on GitHub right now, and that's the master. So we're going to git push GitHub master. And then once this is done running, someday, yeah, it's taking a second. Sometimes it takes a second. And then what's probably going to happen here, if you've never pushed to GitHub before, is it's going to ask you to authenticate. So it'll ask for a username and password, which you will be able to provide. My computer's slow every once in a while, I'm sorry. There it goes. So now we're going to update. Now we can see our code on GitHub. This is our new repository. Like I said, here's a link if you wanted to grab it again. Here we can go and look at any of our files. So the readme.md, the reason why that's somewhat important is that's the first thing anyone sees when they come to your project on GitHub. And like I said, this is the formatting, and that H1 header added like a line break for us, and then we used the H3 header here, and then just a bullet list, a numbered list there. So here's all our files. We're up on GitHub. That's cool. So now we're actually going to start building this and show you how to use SlackBot. Spent a little bit more time on setup than I had anticipated, but that's all right. So these first commands, this is setting up Virtualenv. They are using either Linux or Mac. I think Mac. So like I said, the commands are slightly different. Mine looks different than that. Mine's just end scripts activate. And then they pip install client, Slack real-time messaging API. So we can go check that out. Let's go check it out. Slack real-time messaging API. So this is Slack's documentation. this teaches you how to use it. There's usually like up at the top, they got a starting here, which tells you how to authenticate, how to send like your first request, how to get a response back. And then they typically give you all the particular methods, like what you can get back. So you get this is their documentation. It tells you everything you need to know about how to interact with this, which is pretty cool. And the more you get experience, the more you'll be looking at that. At first, it looks kind of scary, but I promise, in no time, you won't think it's that scary. So what we want to do is we're going to go create a bot on our account. And so I'm going to pull this over real quick. And we're going to log into our account settings. And I'm about 90% positive that any of you can create your own bot on here because I haven't locked down any settings yet. And I know a couple of you have already. So configure apps, and then custom integrations, and here's our bots. So we're going to go look at our bots. I created TestBot, and I created Zora, and it looks like Road Rookie has created a bot, and then Slams has created WordyBot. So, like I said, any of you guys can create one. So we're going to add one. And we're going to give it a username. This is going to be, who's got a name for me? Someone name this bot. Slack. Hold on, I'm logging back into Slack so I can see your suggestions. No one's got anything yet? All right, I'm going to call it Dan. Sorry, Dan, I'm stealing your name. Yeah, that's all right. I don't either. That's why I asked you guys. Hold on. Sorry, I lost the page. All right, Dan. So we're going to add a bot. And what this is going to do is give us an API token. And this API token that we have access to, because we could hit the API all we want, but this is like our password essentially. This is how we connect to our specific instance. So this is looking at our Slack team, and this is our Slack team's password for this bot, because this bot only exists on our Slack team. You can upload an image here. Let's see what I've got on my computer. These are the ones I used already. I usually have something here. I like this one. And then we're just going to save integration. And then we're done. We're just back on that page. I already copied and pasted this. So we're going to use that next, and I'm going to show you. Get out of here. Okay, so this page will reload, and it gives you our API. So the next little piece, so this is actually one more piece of project setup that I would always do first, especially if I'm doing something that I expect to be used outside of just me using it. You'd want to create a system for connecting to your environment variables, or setting up your environment variables. And I've got a really good one that I want to share with you, but I almost need to spend just as much time on that as I would this whole stream. So I'm not going to get into it. For now, we're just going to set our environment variables in this command line. And so that's really easy on Windows. So here it says export. That might be the command for Mac. But for us, it's set token, and then equals, and then we paste it in there, and then boom. So that sets it. If we want to test and make sure that it is set, at least on Windows, I can just type echo and then the percentage symbol, the name of the variable, and you can test this out on your own machine if you know any of your environment variables. Like I could do, so there we go, I passed it in there, but if I want to do path, boom, I can see it there. So any of your environment variables, you could test them right here. So now that we have our token saved in environment variable, because we could just as easily put that variable in our actual file, but we don't want to push that to GitHub. We don't want anyone on the internet able to go find our token and then go mess with our app. I mean, it's not super important in this particular context, but say you're working with a business app and someone finds your API key to Stripe, which is like a payment processor, that could get real bad real fast. So it's always best practice to never push them to GitHub so you don't accidentally do it one day. So this script right here is set up, and I think this is kind of pointless because I'm pretty sure I can find this in Slack by just doing this, and I'm just going to prove that out real quick. But we're going to go find our bot, Dan. So here's Dan, our Slack bot, and I can actually can I get the ID? Maybe I can't. I know, like on an average, like a typical user, like, can I do killed up? Well, I can look at me, and then I can go get my ID right here. This is the ID that we're grabbing. That's just a unique identifier of each member of our Slack group. But I don't know, for one reason or another, whoever built this tutorial is having us do it this way. So we're going to do it. We're going to create a file, and they call it print.id. So we'll just call it bot. So we're actually going to, well, I'm going to copy and paste code, but we're actually going to create something here. Don't mind my errors. Something to do with Anaconda that I've never been able to figure out, or never given it proper time to figure out. So this is, I'm not going to write this code, but I'm going to read to you what's going on. So import OS. OS is a system, like it doesn't care what operating system you're on. This will know if you're on Windows, it'll know if you're on Mac, it'll know if you're on Linux, and it'll know how to go and get your environment variables that you set up. So all that's doing is os.environ.get, and we're getting the SlackBot token, that one that I just set in my terminal window. So it's going to go get that, and we need that to connect to Slack. So we imported this Slack client from Slack client, and Slack client is a class. And to construct that class, we got to pass in a token for our Slack client, and then we're just going to call that Slack client, and then if name.main, this just checks that your current file, like if I go into here and I run Python, I call this bot id.py. If I ran it from here, it's going to check the name. And honestly, I've never really used it much, but I know it's pretty common. But it's used, so if I ran this from another file, it would prevent this from running all this code. If one of my other files called this file, it wouldn't run this file. It wouldn't run all the code in this file until it actually needed it. So maybe we just needed a class or something, or a variable from this file. It wouldn't run any scripts or anything in it. So it's pretty common. I'm not super familiar with it. I know what it's used for, but I've never really used it myself. Never ran into any problems. So then this next line, API call, is the variable, and we're going to store, so Slack client, our instance of the Slack client class that we passed in our Slack token, we're going to call the API call method, and then we're going to pass in users.list. And so if we went back to the documentation here, Slack API, we'd be able to look that up. Now I want the real-time messaging. Actually, I think I want bot users. So this one's designed for bots. Let's see what a body is. So we'll see it down here. Users.list. List all users on a Slack team. So to call different API calls with this Slack client, we just pass in the name of the call right here. So we could call in stars remove, stars add, pins list, IM list. We could test it. We get channels. We can post messages. We can delete messages. We can post reactions, like when you do a thumbs up in the Slack channel. Raven, to answer your question, I believe the way I set it up, it only does it for that instance of the terminal. But, and that's all I'm going to do today, but I'm going to show you better ways to do that in the future. I usually have like a local.m file that stores all of mine, and then I use a library that looks for that file. Like I pass it the name of the file, and then it pulls all my environment variables from there. So that way it's really easy to share if you need to. So yeah, so if anyways, what I was trying to say is if I wanted to add a reaction to a post, we can do that. I mean, there's literally almost anything you can think of that you can do in Slack by yourself, like just on the Slack client. You can pretty much do that through the API, through one of these API calls here. So this is user list. We're going to get a list of all users. Once we're going to save the response to that in this API call, and then if API call.get OK, and we're going to test this real quick. And I'm going to teach you guys one of my debugging techniques for those of you, especially you don't have PyCharm. Let's import PDB. So, PDB is a debugging library, and it's got a method or a class or a function called setTrace, and setTrace just sets a breakpoint. If you're not familiar with a breakpoint, all that does, it pauses your code during the execution right here, and then it pulls it up in the command line, and I can actually start inspecting things. So what I'm going to do is look at what we actually get back from this call, because I've never used it before. I don't know what I'm going to get back from. I don't know what I should expect from that. So I'm going to teach you how to look at what's in there. And then this API call.get OK. We want to see what that is. What are we looking for there? So we're actually just going to go ahead and run the script real quick and see how far we get, because maybe we mess up something. For example, bot name is named Dan. And then we should be pulling our Slack token, so we're going to save that. And so this is great right here. We paused our code right here, and we can see it's actually telling us the next line that it's going to run is users equals API call.get members. So we're paused right here. So what did we get back? Let's check out what we got back from Slack client.api call when we pass in user list. And so they save that in the API call variable. So I'm in a Python interpreter right now. Anything in Python I can do it from here, with the one caveat that with PDB, you can only do one line. So like for loops can be tricky because you can't write multiple lines. And you can in the normal Python interpreter, but in this one you can't. But if I write API call, so holy shit, this is actually what it returns from that from this call. And I suspect, and I know that I'm right because I already looked, these are all just user, and this is all user information here. But let's check out, for example, what did we get back? What kind of object did we get back from this call? And we can look that up, right? If any of you aren't familiar with type, this just checks what's the type of anything you're using. And I use this all the time for debugging, and I'll teach you guys how to use it. For example, if I had a string type, hello, it's going to return string type. 3 returns integer. So let's try it on our API call, because this is a variable holding what we got back from them, right? So we got a dictionary back. So we know we got a dictionary. A couple other cool things that you can use to inspect objects. So say you're working with a class that you don't really know what's available, or maybe they returned like their own class of something. We can inspect that. We could say, so dir shows us all of the class methods and all the attributes that are on that. So I can go find what I might be able to use. And so if I just call dir and then API call, I get this list back. So this is every method or anything I can use on a dictionary. But some of this is obvious, like pop, you guys have probably seen before. Items, keys, I can go and get all the keys. I can go and get all the values. I can copy it. I can do, these are all standard dictionary methods. A trick, and if you've never seen it before, this is one of my other favorite little modules, is pprint, which stands for pretty print. So you could go from pprint, import pprint, and that would allow you to use pprint, which if I did pprint, and I'll show you actually, but PDB actually imports pretty print for you, but they store it as pp. So you just type pp, and then we're going to pass in dir of API call. So this is that same dir call. We're just going to pass it into pretty print, and that just makes it so it's a lot easier to read. This is a lot easier to read than trying to scroll through this list. It's typically it's in alphabetical order. So another one that you can use besides dir, because dir gets us all the methods and stuff, but if we were looking at like an instance, a particular instance, we could actually use vars, and this returns like every variable that's set on that object. So I'm not sure if this works on. Nope, it doesn't. Yeah, they must have a dictionary method. So that doesn't work on that. But if we were looking at a class or a class instance, then we can use vars, and we could see actually what every single attribute on that instance is set as, which can be very helpful for debugging and coding. But so real quick, we want to go and look at what keys we got back from this. So API call .keys is the method. So we got dict keys, we got members, okay, and cache. So we know here that they asked if API call.get equal is okay. So let's see. API call.get. So it says true. So I suspect this just means like if I was successful, it'll return true. If not, it'll return false. I mean, we could get rid of this probably and just say if members, because it's not going to return members if we didn't actually get any members. So let's just see API call .get members, and then let's actually just call length on it. So it's 87. And then I want to actually do one more thing. Actually, say so members equals API call .get members. All right, hold on a second. I want to make sure. Okay, good. All right, you guys still with me? Let me know if you have any questions. I haven't seen anything pop up recently, but let me know. If it's going too slow or you guys got to leave soon, let me know. I'll try and get this wrapped up quicker. So now I'm storing API called .get members. I'm storing it in this variable called members. So I actually want to see what members is. It's a list. So one thing with a list or a string or even an integer is, if you didn't know this, 0, an empty string, and an empty list, and for that matter, an empty dictionary, all evaluate to false So if I said if 0, if 0, like that's the whole only one line at the same time, print yes. So it didn't print anything, because if 0 is like asking it if true, and 0 is not true. 0 is return false. But if I said if 1, print yes, then we print yes. Same thing with a string, same thing with a list, which I want to show you. So if empty list, print yes. It didn't print anything. Empty list evaluates to false. If a list with one item in it, just one high, print yes. We get a yes. So an empty list evaluates to false. A list with nothing in it, a list with at least one item in it evaluates to true. So one way we could automatically right here improve this code. We don't need that whole. We don't need this because this is redundant. Because we know that. Well, I guess it's not redundant necessarily, but we could. I guess we could do the same thing with members. Is what I was going to say. The other thing that's cool about this call, actually, since we're using the get method on a dictionary, a get method, so if I tried to do this instead, I guess I'm probably getting a little off course here, but I could also do this and get this, assuming that key is there. If that key is not there, the nice thing about .get members is it returns none if it can't find the key, which is very useful. And so again, if none, print yes. None also evaluates to false. So these are all very useful tricks as you get a little bit more experience. So you don't have to write all these extra if statements. All right, we'll see you later, Zach. Thanks for hanging out with us. So we're just gonna check and see if we got anything from members, and then if we did, so we can't assign this variable. No, I guess this is, so it'd be none. So for user in users, this is also kind of redundant, but I just want to get through it real quick. So if name in user and so users is just the same as members right here. Sorry. Because remember we saved members as API call .get members. So they're just saving it here as users. So for user, so we're just going to do the same thing. For user in, but we called it members, print user. So that went through and printed just one user at a time. And then we could also do like this. So we could do print user.get name. Now we're just getting the username. So all it's doing is just checking which one of them is named Dan. And when it finds Dan, it's just going to print out the ID. So we're going to actually just go ahead and let it run. We're still in PDB, which means we're still paused. We are still paused right there where that PDB was. And any changes I make over here, they won't matter until I close this version of Python and rerun it again after I save the file. So we're not, even though I changed a couple things here, nothing's happening. So when you're done with PDB, if you want it to continue running, you can say continue, or a shortcut for it is just C. If you want to step to the next line, you can say step, or just S for short. But right now we're just going to have it continue. And so like I said, it looped through every single user, found the one named Dan, and gave us the ID for that user. And in this case, that's our bot. So we want that bot ID for the next piece here. So first, so the same thing we did with the token. We're going to save that ID as an environment variable. And this one's probably not as, as sensitive. You could probably put it in your file. But we're just going to follow along here. So real quick, set ID equals. And at least on Windows, you don't have to use parentheses. It's going to save this as a string anyways. So don't use parentheses. Otherwise, I think it includes them in the string. I could be wrong. But just don't use them. So then real quick, echo ID. Make sure it's set. There we are. All right, now we're going to get into building the actual bot. So here it is. I'm going to create a new file, and we're going to call it starterbot just like them. And so first of all, got some imports there. So we're going to import OS so we can get our environment variables. Time is going to be used. Forget where they use it. We'll find it. And then Slack client, obviously. And here we go. I'm just going to copy and paste all the code they use here real quick, and then we're going to walk through it. And then, so this is all the code they use. So from right here, we could actually test our bot and see that it's working. But I want to walk through some of the code with you first. So this bot is working, and really, so what we're doing right here, so first we're getting our bot ID from our environment variable, and then this app bot here is just, it's going to parse the messages, and then so the way this bot is going to work is when we say, first let me add Dan here. Dan's our bot, we're going to add him. When I say @Dan, blah, 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 that's how this message, blah, 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 that is going to be the command that we use, that we will parse and then decide what to do with. But if we don't say @Dan, then it's just going to ignore the message. And so we can actually read every single message that comes into it, but for our bot's purposes, we want to look at only the ones that come from, or that are spoken to Dan. So if I say @Dan, whatever, when it comes through here, it's going to check for that in the string. And so the way this, the way it's going to come through, and I'll show you guys in a minute, but the way it's going to come through is actually this bracket @ and then the bot ID, which is that user ID that we looked up, and then close bracket. So it doesn't come through as this @Dan. It actually enumerates it out to something like @ and then U56, whatever. It looks like that. But each one of those is for a user, so we know it's @Dan. So we're going to use that in our code. And then example command is do, and I'll show you that in a second. Then we start our SlackBot client, create an instance, call it Slack client. And then these are a couple functions that we're going to use, but this is where it happens. Right here, so we got our if name equals main, because we're going to be running this file. Read socket delay. This is, I mean, in my opinion, it's pretty self-explanatory, but basically every 1 second it's going to come back and look for more messages. So what this script actually does is it runs and it continues to run, and then every second it's going to output any messages that came in during that last second and send them to us through our script. And it's going to do that through this Slack client.rtm connect, and that's that real-time messaging.connect. So what this does is starts our Slack client and starts reading messages. And so when that happens, we just say, we're connected and up and running. If there's any problems, and there's an else statement, connection failed. Maybe we had a wrong Slack token. And then while true, so this is going to run forever. We're going to get the command in the channel back from parse Slack output, which is up here, and that is coming from the Slack client .rtm read. So these two calls are used together. This one starts a connection. This one reads every second. This is going to pass us arguments every second. And then if we get a value back for command and channel, then we're going to handle a command. And then, that's what they're using time for. It's just to sleep for 1 second. So it's just using this to sleep for 1 second. And so we want to go look at these two functions. This is all they're using. And some of the guys that have been with me in the first one yesterday, they've already improved massively upon. Someone's already created a class that handles all this stuff. But this is just like very simple, and you can use this to start running your own commands. And this should make sense for you guys. And if it doesn't, let me know and I'll walk you through it. So first of all, we're going to parse the Slack output. So that just takes in the Slack RTM output, which is the messages read from the Slack client. So when that happens, we get so Slack RTM output. We're going to call it output list. And if I was writing that myself, I would say Slack messages. So it's more, this tells me what it is more. It's more descriptive. And then this is pointless because I would just say if Slack messages. It's so much more descriptive than output list. What is my output list? Output list could be anything. So then, and if output list is greater than 0, and again, I think this is actually also redundant. I haven't tested it yet, but because this is going to be a list, and if our list has anything, then it's obviously going to be greater than 0. But I don't want to change it because I want to get it working, and then so we're just going to change these. And you guys don't need to change these. This is just I wanted to be able to show you guys a little bit how you might clean up your code. So then for output, so we're going to call this for message because it's cleaner, it's easier to read. For message, and then update anywhere where message is. So message text is a lot clearer to me than output text. This is the text of the message. So if message and text in message, and so this, I would rewrite all this, but basically primarily this is checking that our @bot that we saved up here, which looks like this, right? Or whatever our code was, it's going to check that it was from, or it was that @Dan was in the message. And if @Dan's in the message, then it goes on the next part, which is return. And then this is super ugly, but so our message is a string our message actually just looks like this. What I wrote here, this is what's in message.txt, but instead of @Dan, it'll be like this. And so if we said do something, oops, this is what that message returns back to us. And so all this is doing is splitting it at @bot, so it's taking this part out, and it says, so it's indexing at 1. So if you guys don't know, split takes a delimiter, which is @bot, which is this guy, and it splits a string into a list based on that delimiter. So what this is doing is creating a list of 2 elements, which ends up looking like this. And then we should know that if you take the 1 element, which we know that indexes start at 0, so 0 would be this one, and 1 is do something. And then dot strip, I think it takes an extra space here. It looks like, oh, sorry, this should actually be like this. It's 2 strings here. So we've got an extra space here. So the strip is just taking that extra space out, and then lower. So if I wrote do something, it would return do something, all in lowercase. So then we can compare against lowercase rather than worrying about upper or lower. And then it takes message channel. So this is just returning to command and channel, and returning and giving us the command and giving us the channel when @bot was mentioned in a message. And then to clean this up, guys, I would prefer to do something like this, where we go command equals and then no, whoops, that's channel. And then I can just return command channel. And if you don't agree with me that that's easier to read, then I'm sorry. Yes, guys, I will post it tomorrow. Don't worry. You guys can finish up the rest of it. I am recording, and I've just got to upload to YouTube, which I haven't done for the video this long, but I'm sure I can figure it out. So yeah, so this just a couple little tips here and there how to clean up your code. Having this return statement that was using this, because the line was too long, they had to cut it into more than one lines. That's so ugly. Don't do that. Just declare variables that state what you're trying to do. If I'm reading this later and I'm trying to make sense of this in a return statement, I'm like, what the fuck am I looking for? You know what I'm saying? But if I name my variables command, okay, that's getting this, but so this must be the command and this must be the channel. Maybe I need to explore a little bit more and make sure it's right. Then I can go verify this code. I don't have to read this code now to understand what I'm actually passing in. So it's returning command and channel. Super simple. So then once we have the command and the channel, so if command, if channel, again, if those were empty, this would stop evaluating right here. It's not going to run handle command because these would be empty strings, or they would return none, actually. And as we just learned, none returns false. Then we're going to go to handle command. And this is really where all the magic happens. So we're actually going to run this right now just to demonstrate. Python starterbot.py. And guys, we're just about done too for any of those. Oops. Oh, sorry. Python starterbot.py. So, as we said, so you guys could actually write in the bot testing chat room, and it'll start receiving these commands, and you'll see them come through. Actually, it'll be receiving commands from everywhere, but I haven't added any print statements yet. So this is where we're at right here. We are reading all messages that come through Slack. So we're right here, and it's just sitting here on this while true. So it's just going over and over again every second, waiting for input. So let's go ahead and write one. @Dan. Hi. Where's my? Uh-oh. Starterbot command. Okay, I broke something. One sec. I'll return none. Command starts with example command. Tuple object. So for some reason, our command, whoops, had extra comma here. So I was creating a tuple instead of just a string like we wanted. If you use a comma, it's going to automatically try and create a tuple. And then, a tuple just looks like this typically. Oops. But it's not a string, it's a tuple. So when we tried starts with is a string method. So string, oops.
Same.
Oh, sorry. I'm just going to show you guys real quick. String method that we're going to be using is string.starts with, and if we say that it starts with S, then it's going to return true, and then string.starts with L, and we try that, it's going to return false. But what I was trying to do based on the extra comma was something like this: command dot starts with. So this is literally what it tried to execute. Like this is the exact line of code that it tried to execute, and obviously it can't run a tuple because I had an extra comma there, an extra comma right here that turned this from a string into a tuple. So now that we fixed that, we're going to run this again. And we're going to say at Dan, hi Dan. And then, assuming nothing else is wrong, whoops. Okay, sorry. Okay, so we're actually, I think this might actually be where the issue is. Nope, shouldn't be. But this is a good learning, moment for just like kind of debugging. So first of all, I want to import PDB again. Again, this is just gonna pdb.setTrace. I want to inspect why that isn't working. Command channel. For whatever reason, command is coming through as a tuple, so we want to find out why or when it happens. So I'm going to stop it right here and inspect it and see if it's a tuple right there. So that's all we're going to do. So run it. Python. Oops. Starter bot. And then let's just inspect command. Oh, whoops. Click. No, good question, Road Rookie. But so the way this is going through, so if Slack messages, then for message in Slack messages, if this, and so if it gets this far, and so actually this is a good point. We might actually want to put the pdb.setTrace here. If it gets this far and it hits this return, then it's going to return command and channel, and then it's going to stop executing. Because in a function, once you hit your return key, it's returned. It's done. The function's over. It's the same as having like break or continue in a for loop, or break in a for loop if you want to break out of it. Return ends the function and returns whatever values are there. So, but I do want to set my set trace right here, and then pull this one out, because I think this one's running anytime a message gets sent, whether or not we get that far. So one more time, let's run this SlackBot. Did that make sense, Road Rookie? Damn. Did I save it? I hope it's first. So command. Hi Dan, how's it going? So right here, let's try it out. Type command. So it's a string. So our command is a string. At this point in our code, command is a string. And then here we return command and channel. And then here we pass those into handle command. So maybe at this point, let's try it again with the pdb.setTrace. Or we could step through it with that S I was showing you guys. Let's try that. Excuse me. But sometimes this doesn't work exactly how I'd like it to. So a lot of times I'll just set another step trace or set trace and then run it again. So return command and channel. So we're going to return that. If command and channel. So we're right here now. Or sorry, we're actually, we just got done with this. So let's check out command at this point. Still a string. And let's just verify type command. Still a string. We'll step one more. Whoops, step. So now we're going to run into, so next line we're going to actually enter that define handle, or I'm sorry, this, we're going to enter this handle command function. So we're right here now. And let's check again. Command. Still a string. Step response. Okay, well, this is where we're erroring out. So let's get there. Step. Command with numbers, limit spaces. Okay, so that's this guy here. And then if command, so this is where we're just about to run this line where our program breaks previously. And it worked. So I'm just going to continue. So I think what happened is I probably didn't save it last time. So it worked fine. It's no longer a tuple. So yeah, so what was happening there, real quick. So we got to our handle command, and our command was, as we checked about 3,000 times, hi Dan, how's it going? And so response gets set. So basically the way this code is set up is automatically it assumes that it's the wrong command. And so we're going to set our response to, not sure what you mean by that, and then it throws in that example command. That's a way that we could show that if we wanted to show all the commands that were available, we could throw them in there. And then if command that starts with example command, which is do, then we're going to update the response to sure, write some more code and I can do that. And then we send then this is the API call that will actually send a message, and we're sending the response there. So that's what we're sending as the text. So in this case, it did not start with do, so this never ran, and we just sent this as a response. And that's, you can see Dan replied to us right here. And so we're going to restart this. Whoops. Quit. Control C if you ever get stuck inside your command window. If you're in PDB, quit. If you're in Python, quit is the command to exit it. If you're in the middle of like a loop that will never end, Control C will like exit everything that you're doing. And so let's go ahead and fix that code real quick. Just take that, by fix I just mean take out this set trace because we don't want any more. So Python starterbot.py. So now we're running. So now you guys go ahead and talk to Dan in the chat room. And you can say, do something cool. Yep, see, this is the same thing that happened last time. It just, every once in a while, you swear you save, but for whatever reason, you didn't actually save. So it still thinks that that PDB set, oh, no, man, it's probably this one. I had two in there. I'm going to remove one of them. So we're going to run it one more time. Sure, right, it's more code and I can do that. And if I do anything without do in it, Dan, he's going to give us a message where he doesn't understand what we mean. So now we have this. So this is set up. So the only thing that you'd have to do at this point to get this bot running full time, all the time, is to go upload it to something like Heroku, which I'm going to do in a follow-up video. But from here, you can have it running on your machine. So if one of you guys wanted to set this up and have a couple basic commands, just leave your computer on. It'll be running as long as your computer's on, as long as the script is running and it doesn't error out. But I want to show you guys real quick before I let you go just how we would maybe approach creating our own commands, and that is like pretty simple. So we're going to copy their method here, but we're, like I said, I've already had some guys come up with some better ideas on how we can set up commands. But if command dot starts with, and let's say, so one of the things that I want to implement is this start project, where you'll say Dan, at Dan start project Windows, and then all those commands that I gave you earlier, kind of everything we did to set it up, basically this right here, it'll just be a cheat sheet that Dan replies to you. And so you can actually talk to Dan privately in your direct messages, or you could do it out here if you're answering a question for someone. But at any point, you can kind of get the basic setup. So we're just going to have all these cheat sheets available through Dan, or we're actually going to use Zora. Zora's the one I set up yesterday. Dan will be there for now, but we might get rid of him. We might make a million bots, or we might just have one that has a million things. Lots of things we can do there. So if command.starts project, or starts with start project, then we're going to just update the response to, shut up, Zora. Sure, what kind of project do you want to start? And then someone gave me the idea last time for a command where it's just going to repeat everything we said. So if command dot starts with ditto, then response is going to equal. First, before we do that, we want to make sure ditto comes out. So we want to split it, or we just want to take the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 characters. Message is going to equal command, and we're going to say 6, I believe, to the end. And then what we're going to do is response going to equal message. So this is just going to repeat everything after the word ditto. And then why don't we test those real quick? So anyone online, you can test our new commands and just as soon as I run this, unless we had some kind of bug. All right, so go ahead and talk to Dan, anyone who's online and listening. I'm going to do one too at Dan. Cool. So those are some real basic ones. I have actually got a list here of some ideas because the reason I'm teaching you guys how to build this SlackBot is because I want to use a SlackBot to help us kind of administrate and manage our community. I want to be able to have a command that says create a code review, and that puts it in a queue of code reviews, and then anyone who wants to access those code reviews or go do that code review can go do it, and then there'll be another message that I completed this code review, and then maybe you add a link, or maybe and then so it'll manage. For me, I have a list. I have got a task list of things I need to do, because right now I've just got messages from everyone, and some of them are hey, have you done my code review yet? I'm sort of, I've gone at it, or yes I have, or no I haven't yet. So I have I've got to go through each one of these to figure that out, and I want to have one place. If I could just say, hey Dan, at Dan code reviews, or whatever. So that's cool. So I'm going to pull up just that brief list, and it's in my other SlackBot folder. It's in my README. So yeah, so one thing I want to do is add a database to this, so that'll be a part of another stream that I do. And then I want to create a schema. We want to keep like information about our users, you know, what operating system, text editor, Python version, what kind of projects interest them. I know a lot of people have mentioned like deep learning or machine learning, those kind of ideas. I can group you guys into projects based on that. And then we want to add a class. So this kind of stuff is outside of the scope of a SlackBot necessarily, but I'm going to need it for the SlackBot. So then we're going to add commands to add user or to update user info. So you can, on your own, you can just say like, you know, at Dan update OS and then Mac, and then I'll update it for you. And then I'll update that to the database. So then that information's stored, and I can give some people like a list of things they need to do in order to set up their first code review. And then I can go and get that user info. And then scheduling, mentor sessions, live streams, code reviews, like things like that. Like I said, we'll update our database for that. Then we'll add commands for viewing the schedule, scheduling a mentor session or a code review. I'd like to have like my whole schedule available that you just say, you know, at mentoring schedule. And then ideally, eventually, more of you guys are able to help out with mentoring, and you can see everyone's schedule. Or maybe you want mentoring in one specific subject that only these 3 mentors offer, and so you can see those 3 mentors' schedule. So this will get crazier and crazier as we build it together. But the cool thing is that we're building this like literally from the ground up, so you're going to be able to see every single step that happens. And so I don't know about you guys, but I think that's exciting as hell. So then I want to be able to, you know, assign code reviews. Then I want to create some kind of workflow for all this. And then commands for retrieving helpful stuff, like those kind of cheat sheets that I was talking about. I want a command that lists all of, this is Zora. Zora's going to be our main bot. I just created Dan today for fun. But say I want a command that shows like everything I can get help on. Or maybe we have a command for new people. You know, where do I start? What do I do to start getting involved in this community? And then, and then cheat sheets. And then the other thing that I want is just some fucking funny. So excuse my French, guys, but I've had a beer or two and the Niners lost, so I'm upset. And so I just want some like funny commands, you know, things that make our community like more exciting or more fun than just a standard Slack community. So anything you can think of. So I know one thing that forget who exactly was working on it. Whoops, wrong one. Yeah, Raven was working on one. Yeah, Raven didn't even watch the thing yesterday, but Raven made this cat one and this dog one. So you can just type cat or dog, and it creates and it pulls a cat picture for you. And I'm sure Raven would probably be willing to help out if you had questions, or he could share his code. I've already got a copy of his code. I'm supposed to look at it. I haven't had a chance yet. Sorry, Raven. Oh yeah, one thing I told him to do was say, okay, well, Zora's my dog. That's this little retard right here. This is an actual picture of Zora. She's not nearly this fat or retarded looking, but it is funny, so I included it. But yeah, my dog chases cats all day, so I just said, so I told him to like make it random, like 1 out of every 5 times or so. Instead of showing a picture of a cat, say like, oops, Zora ate the cat. So I think that's kind of funny, and it just practices your skills. You know what I'm saying? So just practices trying to do something different, show you how easy it is to implement stuff like that. Like like we were looking at here. I mean, it's up here, but it ended up being like 3, 4 lines of code. If random, show image, else, oops, I ate it. That's all it was. So anyways, any other questions before I let y'all go? I went way longer than I realized, but I think it was all good stuff. Got some debugging in there, got the project set up. Oh, last thing I want to do, go ahead and write in the bot chat if you have anything to say. But now that we've coded what we've coded, we want to update our GitHub. So this isn't in it, obviously. Remove from project. But we want to save our files here, save our git ignore, and we're just going to go and check here. Like I said, git status every time. So we modified our git ignore apparently. We added bot ID and we added starter bot. We want to add those, so we're going to git git add and period will add all the files. Then git commit. And so what did we do here today? We authenticated with Slack and set up our basic SlackBot with several basic commands. And so you want to try and do commits relatively frequently, even as you're working in your code, as you change one little piece, and then add a good description, because that's just going to be useful as you're sharing it with others or looking back into it later and figuring out what you did or why you did it. So then when we're done with that, so it's committed. The last thing we got to do, like I said, now it's committed to our local repository, but what we want to do is update this repository, and we haven't done that yet, as we'll see. We don't have our new files in there yet, but as soon as we say git push GitHub master, and we know how long that took last time, but it shouldn't take this long this time. There it is. And we're all set. Everything's up, everything's running. You can share this code. I'm gonna share it right now. Okay, is there a way you can see all your previous commits or roll back something to an old commit? Yes, there is, Raven. I am not a GitHub expert, so every time I need to do something like that, I just Google it. And that's something I'd like to add to our cheat sheet commands eventually, but for now that's not a thing. So I would just Google it. If you get stuck personally on something, let me know and I'll help you figure it out. But previous commits, so one thing you can do, like if I'm looking at these, and I'm not as good in the git command line, but I think we can do like git help, or let's see, help git. There's something there that we can kind of get an idea of what's available. But there's like a ton of Git resources out there, and I'll try to identify some good ones, because Git is actually something that I still struggle with at times. My work project, our master branch was like 30 commits behind like our active branches that we're building new features on. So we had the hardest time like getting our master branch updated. And then, like I said, we have one for Heroku and one for GitHub. So we got GitHub updated finally, but then Heroku was behind, and then that was a challenge. There's probably people out there of you guys that could probably help me some with Git, but that can be something that we learn and grow with together. But like I said, I've never had a problem that I can't figure out through Googling enough times, or sometimes asking questions on Reddit or Stack Overflow. But you can, I can go and look at, so let's go look at, so these are the files that we updated this time, and I'm going to make one more commit real quick. Readme. Git status, git add, git commit, updated readme with nonsense, git push, GitHub master. And the only reason I did that, I pushed a new one, is because these two are new, so we're not going to be able to see any changes. And this one, I don't think actually made, I think I added a space or something. So I didn't actually change anything. So that's done now. So now we're going to actually be able to go in and look at our README file, which has changed. And so this is we've got our most recent version here. I can go and look at the history. So here's the first commit. Those are the changes that were made. There was no previous code in there. And then this is the last version of it. And so we just added, this is a test to it. We didn't change anything else, but I can go and view that whole file if I want to. I think blame, so these are all our commits to the project on branch master. We'll work soon enough on different branches. Like I said, different branches add a lot of complexity to your project, or they can if you don't do them right. So we'll get into that as we start working on more group project stuff together. For now, on your own projects, just try and keep one branch. I mean, we're in the very beginning of what we're starting to work on together, so but all this stuff will come. But yeah, so you can pretty much check out the differences. You can see what's different on your different branches. You can merge your branches on GitHub. You can merge it on your computer. Just all sorts of tips and tricks for it. Some of the stuff I'm good at, some of it I'm not. But yeah, that's pretty much where we're at. So yep, with that, guys, I'm going to leave you. If you have any other questions, let me know afterwards. But I'm going to go ahead and stop recording and then shut down our meeting. And then, yeah, thanks for joining, guys. Appreciate it. Go ahead and give me any feedback you have on the session. I know I dragged everything out. I need to get better at getting to the point more. But I think it's helpful to go through some of those debugging steps at times. So anyways, just any feedback. Don't just say, oh, it was great, nothing was wrong, because I know there are places that I can get better. I'm only going to find out if you guys tell me. So thanks, guys. We'll talk to you soon.